Alright, testing, 1, 2, 3. We'll be starting this live stream severe weather update here in just a couple of minutes. Good late afternoon on this Thursday, April 17th. Just after 4:50 p.m., heading towards 5 o'clock on this Thursday, April 17th. This is Jacob Melton coming to you live from the Southern Michigan Weather Center. And I just wanted to take some time late this afternoon to discuss not only what to expect tonight and tomorrow or Friday morning in terms of thunderstorm potential, but we're also going to discuss the elephant in the room, which is our conditional severe weather threat that we are potentially anticipating Friday evening. Again, it's a fairly conditional threat where everything has to go together just right for it to take place, but we'll discuss all that in more detail from our social media posts. We'll discuss that in more detail in this live update. Starting off with a current look at our regional satellite and radar, as you can see, it's been quiet across our local area today. But we have been with sunshine earlier today, but now we're seeing clouds begin to increase ahead of this system. We are also seeing some shower and thunderstorm activity over Wisconsin and northern Illinois that is beginning to try to make it in our area, but here's the glitch with that. We have some dry air overhead that is kind of suppressing it, as you can see, as it tries to move east. As it tries to move east, it kind of runs into that dry air and falls apart. So we don't necessarily expect if we do see any precipitation this evening, it would be on the very light side. Nothing major anticipated, but we really don't expect precipitation in the form of shower and thunderstorm activity to really move in until late tonight into tomorrow morning. In fact, let me switch over to a different region, give that just a minute to get going here. And as you can see, off to our west, we have showers and thunderstorms ongoing across portions of Minnesota into Iowa. In fact, let me overlay watches and warnings. There is a couple severe thunderstorm warnings, and a severe thunderstorm watch was recently issued for portions of Iowa into Minnesota. I apologize if I said Illinois earlier. So Minnesota and Iowa, and into portions of Wisconsin as well. We are also watching additional storm development that will be expected off to our west across portions of Nebraska into Iowa, maybe Kansas and northwest Missouri as well. And these storms will have the potential of pretty much an all hazards threat, primarily large hail, some of which could be significant. In fact, if I switch some layers around, I will pull up the latest SPC outlook. And as you can see, there's an enhanced risk, level 3 out of 5, across portions of Nebraska and Iowa. That includes like the Omaha Metro towards the Des Moines Metro. And that is primarily for the potential of large hail, some of which may be significant, as you can see by the black outline. Significant hail, which is greater than 2 inches in diameter. Over there, we're also watching for potential of damaging wind gusts. Which, let me take that off. This is the wind potential. Damaging wind gusts will also be a potential hazard, and we are watching for the potential tornado threat, particularly around the Omaha Metro. Still level row 1 threat at 5%, but just something to be aware of. We might see primary threat of large hail, some of which could be significant over there, and the potential for damaging winds and maybe an isolated tornado or two. These storms, once they form, will eventually track east and head towards our area overnight into Friday morning. Now, given the timing of this activity in our local area, I don't necessarily expect severe thunderstorms in our local area. In fact, if I go back to the normal SPC outlook, let me just pause this real quick. We'll go back to our local view, Great Lakes. As you can see, we're not in a particular severe weather risk for tonight. That stops across portions of Wisconsin and Illinois. But we are in a general thunderstorm risk. As you can see, I'm trying my best to highlight this green outline here. We are in a general thunderstorm risk, and we cannot rule out the potential of maybe some small hail with some of these storms, as they will be driven by elevated instability. So maybe some smaller hail, maybe some sub-severe gusty winds, and just your thunder, lightning, and heavy rainfall as well. But we're not necessarily expecting severe weather with our activity late tonight into Friday morning. That carries us over to tomorrow, which we will have to discuss in more detail, as that is a rather conditional threat. And once we will be pulling up some model data here soon, so we'll be able to discuss that in more detail as well. But I'm going to transition to another graphic here. Give me just a second. There we go. And this is a graphic that we posted on our social media platforms earlier this afternoon with the latest Storm Prediction Center Day 2 outlook that was updated this afternoon, along with a general breakdown of what to expect in terms of severe hazards. Now, I will point out that in the afternoon update, they did go ahead and trim back our slight risk a little bit from the north. They brought that south, and they also removed some of our southeastern and southeast lower Michigan and Thumb counties from the slight risk, and they downgraded that to a marginal level 1 out of 5 risk. The vast majority of our area remains under a level 2 out of 5 slight risk, and that is primarily for this is conditional potential that we will have to discuss in more detail when we look at the model data, but the conditional potential of damaging winds and large hail. We are also watching, again, it's super conditional and everything goes right. The tornado potential, as we have highlighted, is very low. Not zero, but rather low. But some model data is pointing us towards potential. We'll show that in the model data, but maybe up towards the Tri-Cities. We've been seeing some signs of maybe some slightly higher tornadic potential if a storm can form and go surface-based due to some moisture pooling and the shear from the warm front. Again, this is a very conditional potential, and we'll be breaking all this down into model data. So again, this slight risk, level 2 out of 5 risk for the majority of our area. This is primarily for damaging wind gusts and large hail, and very low end but non-zero threat of a tornado or two. This is a lower confidence setup due to the capping inversion and timing of the cold front, which will be responsible for the forcing for potential severe thunderstorms for the most part. But I must caution you that even though this is a lower confidence setup, if things do to come together just right, and we do have storms develop during the Friday evening hours. If storms are able to form and break the cap, they may quickly become severe due to the amount of instability and wind shear above the surface. I was looking at values earlier between 2,000 to 3,000 in terms of CAPE or instability, or another term we use is storm fuel. But there's plenty of storm fuel out there, and there's also plenty of wind shear above us that any potential storms that form will be able to tap into. Like I saw 50 to 60 knots of shear above the surface. We'll explain all this when we look over at the model data, but just know, if we do see storms tomorrow evening, they could potentially get severe rather quickly due to the amount of instability and wind shear overhead. Bear with me just a moment here, and we're going to switch over to some model data. And let me go ahead and click over to that. This is the afternoon. We're going to start off with a look at the afternoon run of the HRRR model, also known as the High Resolution Rapid Refresh model. And here we are looking at what a simulation of what the radar may look like, 1 kilometer above the ground level. This is a computer simulation, which means the radar may not and probably will not look exactly like what's being shown here, but it does help us show what we can expect in general in terms of any shower, thunderstorm activity, and whatnot. So as you can see, this was starting at 2 p.m. That is when this run was valid starting at. 2 p.m. this afternoon, it is showing some showers, even some thunderstorms off to our west. As I was discussing, this initial activity will run into some dry air and will generally fall apart for the most part. I can't rule out a few light showers, maybe across portions of southwest lower near the lake shore. But this evening, I don't expect too much. It will generally remain dry. You have our storms off to our west across Wisconsin and Minnesota, down into Iowa and Nebraska. This is at 8 p.m. this evening, Eastern time. You see our storms off to our west. That will eventually move east throughout the night. As you can see, this is at 2 a.m. It's in portions of Iowa for the most part. Some additional activity over Wisconsin into Lake Michigan, and that will be tracking the central Michigan throughout the overnight hours. Some additional shower activity possible here, but nothing too much going on. Heading into, we'll stop here at 9Z, that would be 5 a.m. Again, some showers, maybe some thunderstorm activity across central lower. And some of these storms may contain some small hail, but we don't particularly expect severe thunderstorms due to really just timing. Any instability will be elevated, and we don't expect too much in terms of severe weather at this point, but just be aware of the potential for heavy rain, lightning, and maybe some small hail with some of these storms. That will continue through the morning. This is at 8 a.m. Again, same general idea. Some showers, maybe some thunderstorms, not really expecting anything severe. And this takes us right through. This is at 16Z, that would be what, noon? Yeah, about noon. Again, similar idea. None of this will necessarily be severe in nature, but probably just some showers, maybe a few thunderstorms with some small hail. Heading into the afternoon, that lifts off to the north. And we'll stop here at 4 p.m. We do have a storm in northern lower, at least according to the HRRR model. But, as you can see, not much really going on over our local area. I will click on a sounding from, let's go 1 more hour ahead. This stuff over northern lower will probably be elevated in nature. And if anything, will probably produce a large hail threat, if anything. I'm going to stop here at 5 p.m. and I'm going to grab a sounding from around the Lansing area. Now, this is getting quite technical here, but the basic breakdown of this is you can see we have plenty of wind shear overhead late Friday afternoon into the evening. But what is going to suppress storm development during the afternoon hours As you can see, there's quite the capping inversion, especially around 850 to 7, between 850 to 500. Well, we'll say 700, maybe 600 millibars, we'll say, or something up there around there. This is our capping inversion. And that is going to prevent anything that might try and fire during this time from really getting going. And I'm also going to discuss our convective temperature that is at 94. We won't be getting quite that high, but we'll show it more in just a second. But some guidance was indicating some of our area heading into the lower 80s tomorrow. But during the afternoon, we're going to be capped, and that's really going to stop any storms from getting going and taking advantage of the environment in place potentially, especially on the synoptic side. But as you can see, there's plenty of instability. Like we're at 2200 surface base Cape around at 5 p.m. in the Lansing area. But we're going to fast forward and go towards, let's see, this does have some storms north of the Grand Rapids area up in the central lower. And I will take a sounding around Saginaw. And I'll show you my point of why we need to be watching. As you can see, there's still some capping inversion. This is near the Saginaw area. But here's the thing. You can see our elevated moisture, 66, dew point to 69 air temperature being modeled. Let me actually go one more hour. Hour back. Okay, never mind. But, as you can see, we still have the elevated wind shear. And we still have plenty of instability. But any storms can manage to break through this cap, which this model does show some convection across central lower. And this is at 23 Z, so that'd be 7 p.m. So we will have to watch. If any of this can get past the cap and rooted to the surface, that is what we will have to pay attention for damaging wind. Again, damaging winds and large hail is the primary threat. But given the proximity to the warm front, and if the HRRR solution of moisture pooling, well, not only the HRRR, the RAP is also doing, well, RAP is basically a lower resolution version of the HRRR, but if the HRRR solutions of moisture pooling verifies, we'll have to watch central lower. I will circle it. I'm kind of circling the area to watch. So like the Tri-Cities, north of Grand Rapids to the Tri-Cities up into the thumb. We'll have to watch for the slightly elevated potential of a brief tornado. Again, tornadoes are not necessarily a big concern tomorrow, but just something to be aware of, and we will be watching that potential. All right. Going at 8 p.m., as you can see, there is that cell we need to be watching, tracking through the Tri-Cities into the thumb area. And we have additional storms firing along the cold front off to our west, across parts of Wisconsin, down into Illinois, into Missouri. That will track east towards our area during the overnight hours. This is at 11 p.m. Now, the thing about this is, yes, this activity could be severe in nature as well. But once we get past, this will be past sunset, and that is past peak heating. We will begin to lose any surface-based instability we may have. And these storms would likely begin to become more elevated in nature, which would negate any tornado, which will really suppress any tornado threat. Or we could still have mainly a large hail threat and maybe a lower end gusty wind threat as well with this activity. We're going to go to 2 a.m. As you see, still some shower, maybe some thunderstorm activity. But I think any severe threat will honestly be done around 2 a.m. as that is way past that's well past the prime time for severe weather in terms of instability. And that activity will eventually move east during the overnight hours. And Saturday, we generally expect to be quiet for the most part. Maybe some showers near the state line, but we'll generally be quiet across the area, at least according to the HRRR model. Now, we're going to go ahead and show another product here. This is the dew point. The dew point is generally a measure of moisture in the air. And as you can see, this afternoon, we're quite dry over the area. Dew point's only in the 20s to 30s. And that is what we were looking. As you saw earlier posting on our social media today about elevated fire danger. With these warmer temperatures and dry air overhead, along some elevated winds today, that is producing conditions for increased fire weather danger. So, for those of you watching this evening, not necessarily a good evening to be burning out there, as any fire that does get going could quickly become out of control. But as you can see, dry air will hang out for the... We do begin to see a little bit of moisture coming in during the overnight hours. So dry air through the evening, overnight our moisture begins to come in. And that is what we will be watching for elevated thunderstorm potential during the morning hours. Possibly a small hail threat. We're not necessarily expecting severe weather. But we're going to go to... See, at 2 p.m. our moisture is beginning to arrive into the area. You see, we got some high 50s to some 60s dew points showing up. And we're going to stop here at 22Z. That'll be 6 p.m. And this is the moisture pooling I was talking about, discussing earlier, that may cause some elevated potential for a storm to become surface-based and produce large hail and damaging winds. And maybe potentially a tornado, localized tornado threat as well. Again, I'm not super concerned about a big tornado outbreak or anything like that, but all it takes is one to cause some issues depending on where it tracks. Well, really anywhere, but just something we want you to be aware of. It's not a super high potential tomorrow, but the potential is there. I will go ahead and take a sounding. Let's go near Mount Pleasant. This is at 22Z, so that is 6 p.m. I will specifically put Mount Pleasant as a matter of fact. Actually, maybe instead of that, I'll do Alma. K-A-M-N, that's the Alma area. And as you can see, we got near 3,000 surface-based CAPE. You can see our moisture overhead, 67, dew point to 72 surface temperature. And our cap is a little bit weaker at this point. So if this moisture pooling is enough to overcome the cap and the storm manages to get going and become surface based, with plenty of wind shear overhead, we'll have to watch particularly for large hail and damaging winds, but we will have to watch to see if it could spin up enough to produce a tornado as well. This does not really look like the environment, especially with the capping overhead, for strong tornadoes or anything like that. Of course, you know, that's kind of one of those things that's difficult to really say for certain. But just be aware that if a storm can get going in this environment and become surface-based, we'll have to watch for damaging winds, large hail, and the low-end potential for a tornado or two as well. Heading through the evening hours, our moisture does remain overhead. But, again, the cold front doesn't really begin to come through until, we'll say, 2 a.m. Our cold front is beginning to track through the area. And that's really past the peak of the timing for severe weather. But I will go ahead and pull sounding. We'll do near Lansing. As you can see, that's really past the peak for instability. But there's still potential for maybe some elevated storms, probably with maybe some hail, or maybe some, primarily hail, but maybe some gusty winds as well. But it has really passed the peak timing for severe weather. So, and that moves through the state during the overnight hours and will be out of here by Saturday morning. And we expect it to be mostly quiet, maybe a few showers near the state line, but we don't expect anything too concerning. I am going to show, let me break down the cap in more detail. This is going to be mixed. Actually, we'll go surface-based SIN, C-I-N. That is a measurement of the cap, or the lid that we like to call for storm development. And as you can see, any activity that's not showing a cap. Actually, we'll go mixed layer. We'll go mixed layer. Again, it's not really showing anything during the morning hours, but we know any activity will likely be elevated in nature and producing maybe small hail. Not really anticipating anything too severe. Heading into the afternoon, as you can see, this is at 2 p.m. There's plenty of capping overhead. That's going to suppress any storms from developing in the first place. Heading into towards the later afternoon and evening hours, we'll stop at 6 p.m. This is something that I was talking about earlier. You can see it begins to weaken, particularly near and north of the I-96 corridor. We'll have to watch for a storm potentially try and get going in this environment. And if a storm manages to get going and break through this capping inversion and become surface base, that is what we'll have to watch for severe weather. Not everyone will see a storm tomorrow during the late afternoon and the evening hours. Many of you won't see anything. But it's just going to be one or two of those that if they can get going, they could certainly cause some issues. And that is what we've been trying to communicate here. But heading back towards the evening hours or the late evening and the overnight hours, the capping comes back in. Any storms that are in the area overnight will likely be elevated in nature and primarily produce hail, if anything. As our cold front tracks through overnight and in the severe weather threat towards Saturday morning at the latest. One more product I'm going to show you, and then I'll actually show you another model just to discuss the differences. But this is a significant tornado parameter, and this takes some products such as uses the same structure as Thomson 2012 for effective later SIGTOR, but with surface-based cape, surface-based SIN or capping, surface-based LCL or lower cloud level, and 0 to 1 kilometer SRH or shear in place of their mixed or effective layer counterparts. This is a fixed product, so the STP is not a perfect product by any means, but it does show us, hey, there might be tornado potential here. And that is what I'm going to show you later on. I'm going to go, and as you can see at 6 p.m. it is showing elevated potential like 2s to 3s, particularly back in Wisconsin, showing higher values. But in our local area, it is showing 2s to 3s, mainly north of I-96, up towards areas like Alma, Carson City, and back east towards the Tri-Cities and Thumb. We'll go another hour again. Tri-Cities area in particular at 7 p.m. But it quickly fades away after sunset as the environment becomes capped once again and we lose surface-based instability. I will go ahead and do a general sounding for the entire area. This is going to be a box sounding. Give me just a minute to pull that up. And this is valid at 22Z, so 6 p.m. This is a general sounding over the entire region. As you can see, our cape is approaching 2,000. This is a general sounding again. And we still have a bit of a capping inversion. But again, plenty of wind shear for any storms that can get going and become surface-based, get through that cap. Any storms that does get going and can become surface-based, we'll have to watch, as they could go severe quickly and become capable of large hail and damaging winds and the lower end potential of a tornado or two. We'll do around the Saginaw area. This is at 7 p.m. Again, we're at to see what happens with this cap. But if a storm gets going in this environment, becomes surface based, we'll have to watch primarily damaging winds and large hail, but potential for a tornado as well. Your 2800 surface base cape. Again, still some capping, but as you can see, moisture is elevated across northern portions of our area, and that is something we're going to have to watch for the more still conditional but slightly elevated threat of a surface-based storms with damaging winds, large hail, and the lower end potential of a tornado. Alright, I'm going to switch over to another model, and I will show you another model syncing on this. The NAM has honestly been slow, except the other models have started to come in with it as well. The slower solution, which will kind of suppress the severe weather threat as well in terms of the cold front. But we're going to go. Again, it's showing moisture. It does not show the moisture pooling quite as significant as what the HER is showing. The HER was showing a pocket of mid to upper 60s dew points across our northern counties. The NAM's not really showing that, but it is coming to a bit more agreement with the models are coming to a bit more of agreement with timing of the cold front. So, and that just makes this fret more conditional, as the front is what's really gonna get storms to fire during the evening, later evening, and overnight hours. But again, those hours are past the peak timing we look for severe weather, which is during the late afternoon and evening hours, as you've had time to build heat and instability through the day. But again, the NAM doesn't really show that, and it does agree on the cold front timing coming through during the overnight hours and then early morning hours of Saturday. Okay. All right. Let me take a look at temperatures, actually. Temperatures, all right. So, we're going to start here at 7 a.m. on Friday evening. Again, we're in the 50s, lower to mid 50s, maybe some 40s up towards the thumb. This is at 7 a.m. Friday. We might have some elevated shower, thunderstorm activity, maybe with some small hail overnight tonight in the Friday morning. Nothing severe currently anticipated, but we will watch that just in case. Oops, sorry about that. But we're going to move throughout the day, and we'll go at 2 p.m. We're in the mid to upper 70s across the southwest lower. Our temperatures we're in the 60s to the north. But we will be rising throughout the day, and we'll have to watch to our south. We'll have to be looking for the potential of some 80s as well. 80s to our south across like near and south of I-94, and mid 70s up to around the I-96 corridor. And once you get north of like the M46 corridor, temperatures begin to drop off some. And again, it is this northern counties that we have to watch for the warm front and moisture pooling to see if we can get a surface-based storm or two to fire. And that is really be our primary driver for severe weather in our local area. But as you see, temperatures begin to drop off towards the overnight hours. They'll still be elevated, so any storms that will be ongoing, we'll have to watch for a lower end hail threat and maybe some gusty winds. But as we're past this point of surface-based instability at that point, the severe threat begins to lessen late in the evening towards the overnight hours. And our cold front comes through overnight into Saturday morning, dropping temperatures back in the upper 40s, into the 50s. And maybe some 60 degrees around Metro Detroit. But it'll be a little bit cooler day on Saturday behind the cold front. Alright. Does anyone happen to have any questions? We'll take a minute to see if anyone has any questions before we go ahead and sign off for the evening. Just for a minute, let me look at some other sources. Don't see anything there. Check Facebook. Nothing there. Blue Sky. Just checking all my feeds, make sure I don't miss any potential questions. Nothing yet. Little friends. I don't have anything there. Check Insta. Still doesn't look like we have anything. Alright. I don't see any questions there. I don't see any questions on the YouTube chat. So, at this point, we are probably going to go ahead and put an end to this live update for this evening. And we will continue to be looking at new model data, as we were expecting like the new herd to come in at around 9 o'clock for the new evening run. And we will also be looking at other model data throughout the evening and overnight. And we will have updates throughout the day tomorrow as necessary, not only on social media, but live stream updates as necessary. If we end up under a severe thunderstorm watch or something like that, I do plan to start a radar live stream similar to what we've done before. A radar live stream with cut-ins as necessary if we do get any severe thunderstorm warnings. We'd be doing that regardless of a watch being issued or not, if severe thunderstorm warnings are issued. And if for some reason, again, it's a very low potential, but if any county in our viewing area ends up under a tornado warning, we will be live with non-stop coverage until the danger is over. So again, we will be having updates throughout the day tomorrow on our social media platforms as we look over at new model data, new SPC outlook guidance comes in and whatnot. We'll be posting updates as necessary there, and we are prepared to go live tomorrow as necessary. So again, we're going to let you go for the evening. This is Jacob Melton here in the Southern Michigan Weather Center. Stay tuned to Southern Michigan Weather. We will keep you advised.